One of the things that you get the fun of doing when you have a growing YouTube channel is you get to expand your circle of influence. People start educating you about new markets, and I want to highlight what I have found out about the Canadian housing market here in the last 6 or 8 weeks or so. And I was concerned, but based on some data I found out yesterday, my concern level went up. It cubed. Right, it went up 3x or whatever you want to call that. Um, so can we talk about it?
Yeah, yeah.
So my base concern for Canada housing market, I'm not sure if you know this, but my base concern is they don't have 30-year mortgages. The most common mortgage in Canada is a 5-year ARM, right? They don't have 30-year folks. And again, they have 25-year amortizations. So my initial concern started about 6 or 8 weeks ago when I read an article, I think it was by TD Bank, a Canadian bank, talking about some of their borrowers, right, homeowners, indicating in a survey that they may become forced sellers when their loans reset. Right, they got these arms at like 1.5, and where Canada was, right, they may have to refi into a 3, which is double. Right, that's a problem. Right, not quite our 2008 teaser loans, but still 1 to 3. That's a problem. Right, I saw a bunch of forced sellers. Then like 2 or 3 weeks after that, Canada's central bank came out with a shocking surprise full 100 basis point move, which makes that pain even worse, right? So again, my fear was, hey, you go from a 1 to a 4, or 1.5 to 4.25. There might be some people that have to sell because they just can't afford it. What is it? Well, I have one more piece, but let's stop there. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, their market was way overheated, well ahead of the United States. They had already seen hyperinflation in housing prices, real estate values over there for a long time before we got there. And it is interesting with their 25-year mortgage and the way the mortgage industry over there works. But yeah, interest only, short-term interest only debt is dangerous when things start to correct. And they're seeing a correction. They're seeing values drop at a record pace, I think, over there. But it's kind of happening all over the world right now. Everything's kind of resetting.
Yeah. And I think Canada may go down as the largest one because of what so first off, because again, I dug into this, right? So again, the fear, how you have a housing crash, or how does a correction become a crash? It's when you have forced sellers that beget more forced sellers. And my initial fear was, hey, as these 5-1s reset, it's just going to be month after month, somebody else resets, and then they may have to sell, right?
And let's go correction versus crash. So correction's what, 20%?
20% or under, and crash is 20% or over.
Right. And usually you see it around 50%. I don't think we've dropped more than 50%. We saw that in 2009, a lot of different markets.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my market was 75. That was fine.
And that's in values. We're talking about values, and values have been so inflated. You drop 50%, you're probably back to normal for some areas and some
trend line, right? Trend line. Yeah. Reversion to the mean. But again, so back to Canada, right? I was nervous. I said, hey, this is a problem. If rates really jump at the refi time, you will have forced sellers, and that's not good, right? They'd want to stay, but they have to sell because they can't afford it. Problem. Then a Canadian viewer reached out to me and said, Michael, it's worse than that. I'm like, worse than that? He goes, yeah, apparently there's 2 kinds of 5-year arms. I had no idea. So there's what you and I know of a 5-year arm. Basically, you get a rate, it's fixed for 5 years, right? That's kind of what you and I would expect. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, no, I mean, it could be adjustable where it adjusts every 6 months, every year. I mean, there's different kinds.
Okay. So when I think 5-1s, I think 5-year fixed, and then it adjusts every year after, right? That's
that's one, but there are some that adjust, so there's different types.
There are different types, but when I normally think homeowner 5-1, 7-1, that's where my mind went. So maybe
you're fixed
I'm just
at a
wrong.
certain percentage for 5 years, and then
yeah. So that's just where my mind went. Apparently, in the Canadian housing market, again, shout out their bankers and lenders for basically doing what our bankers did in 06, 07. They've created an exotic product that is what I'm calling, not their words, I'm calling a variable fixed rate arm, where it basically says you're going to get a rate below the traditional one. Let's say traditionally it's 2.5. We're going to give you one at 1.5, but we are going to have this thing called a trigger rate, which again, it's set at traditionally a high level that would never trigger, But if it does, all the loans trigger at the same time, or potentially all trigger at the same time. And as you know, we've been in an environment, at least in Canada, where they had this surprise 100 basis point move. There's talks of more. So the viewer told me, Michael, we're getting dangerously close to trigger rates. And you won't get a natural order like I was seeing, like every month some would come. If trigger rates get clipped, lots of homes come on at the market at the same time. And I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's all about inventory, right? So
Yeah.
inventory levels are what dictate prices. The more you have of something, the less valuable it's going to be. The less you have of something, the more competition there is for it. That's that whole question. Is it demand that drives prices, or is it inventory? Ultimately, it's rates that drive demand and drive motivation on the sell side that creates inventory, right? And then demand is what sucks the inventory up if the rates are in the right place. But if rates are too high, tons of houses come on the market, you kind of lose your demand.
Well, I think it just, and I think it blows up, right? Because again, what are we seeing in China today? China's housing market crashed 39.7% in a month. That was transactions, right? Values follow. But dude, can you imagine 39.7% collapse in transactions in a month? That is your consumers.
What's been the result of all of that over there is mortgage boycotts.
Consumers,
people that were buying these vacant housing units that the government kind of put on them, they've stopped making payments at scale. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over there with their housing market, how this all plays out.
Not good.
You're in a country where they'll come lock you up. You don't pay your mortgage.
Yeah. I believe the Chinese housing market is crashing right now. I believe the Canadian housing market is at risk. New Zealand similarly has the 5-1s. Australia is having some real pain. Yeah, this is a worldwide phenomenon. And then the other thing you brought up, people don't like to hear this, but Canada's housing market or affordability, much worse than ours. Canada's housing market went up 400%, where ours went up 100, right, on a linear scale. So they're coming off a much bigger. This could be a real problem.
It is. Australia went through the same thing. So Australia housing went up exponentially compared to ours as well. And they really, Canada and Australia started the correction first, ahead of us. So yeah, it's a global problem. I mean, again, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars were pumped into the economies of the world by central banks around the world, governments around the world through the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So that liquidity had to go somewhere. And the interest rates were artificially low everywhere. And it just created so much demand for things because it was easy, free money. Now it all has to unwind.
Yeah. But that's why I think the U.S. housing market will be a stable ship in a wild storm, because of the 30-year fixed rate debt, right? If you borrowed at 2.7, you never have to sell. You don't have to, right? But in Canada, you could have a 1.3, get your trigger rate because, the Fed over the central bank there takes it up another 100 basis points. You get your next mortgage statement, it's 200%. You're like, dude, I can't afford this. And then everybody sells. And then you have what we had in 2008, where every other house had a for sale sign. It could get ugly.
Yeah. It could be very interesting. And the question is, how big is that market, and what type of inventory do they have? Would they have? And what's the demand cycle over there for buyers? Because I know they have the same problem there. There's a lot of people that want to buy, but they're just priced out. They're coming to this country for investment properties, things like that. So if that starts to happen, the question is, how quickly can that inventory get absorbed? And what level are they going to be able to adjust the prices to? I don't know. It'll be really, really interesting to watch. And it's happening all over the world, and this country, especially, the next few years will be really interesting to see what happens in the housing market and how inventory levels are affected by what's going on. But we're just at the beginning of all this. I mean, it's just very, very early in the cycle. Even if you go back to 2008, 2009, it took several years when that whole thing started to get over the cliff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of time period. Probably 2007, 8, it all started. Right. And then you didn't see it. Boom, it just fell off a cliff.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of pain in the housing markets. I think, again, for me, it's my lesson from kind of 06, 07 is you watch the debt structure. If the debt structure is put together where if it resets at the wrong time for lots of people that become forced sellers, that's your cascading dominoes. That's what I
it's,
see.
it's, it's such a self-fulfilling prophecy because they originate these things at this product comes out at the same time. Well, it
Exactly.
just comes out. So everybody kind of gets into them at the same time.
Yeah,
And
they're
then
like,
they
I'm
reset and
excited.
they renew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
it'll be interesting to see if they do something like a forbearance type of model based off of what we did here during the pandemic
maybe
to kind of help offset some of that and kind of control a little bit of that contagion. They're going to have to do something because, you start creating all these new products and they come due at the same time.
That's exactly right. Right. That's the difference where I went from 6 weeks ago to last night was that trigger rate, right? An ARM reset cascades monthly or quarterly. It's a problem, but it might be manageable. It's certainly manageable the first 6 months. You get a trigger rate that's on, I don't know, make up a number, 33% of all mortgages that resets the same weekend. That's a problem. That's a problem. So this trigger rate could be a real big problem. Again, this is a guy in the U.S. who's never bought in Canada. I'm reacting to data I'm collecting from others. So if you're in Canada and you want to send me more data about trigger rates and ARMs and these, I'll call exotic products that really could cause some pain, you can reach out to me on my website. Greg, where can people find you?
Yeah, gregdickerson.com. That's where all my info is, YouTube channel and podcast. Go check it out.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you.